What's going on, CDL fans? It's time for my first power ranking of the 22-23 season. And let me just start off by saying this was the hardest power ranking video I've ever had to do. If you saw any of my videos last year, I did one pretty much after, like almost every week, and definitely after and before every major. But this was without a doubt the hardest power ranking I ever had to do. I think this is the closest we've ever had to teams. So let's just kick right into it with my number 12 team. And unfortunately, it is the Las Vegas Legion. Now, I think this team actually has made a lot of strides and they do look pretty solid. But out of every other team, there wouldn't be any other team I'd put below them, unfortunately, but I do think they look good, and I think they are an underdog team that could make waves at Major 1. And a note on my pre-Major 1 news that I have down below, obviously there were a ton of upsets, but there are no undefeated teams, and there are no teams without a series win, so I think that's absolutely crazy that all the teams have between 1 and 3 wins after their first 4 matches. Definitely just shows how close it is, and Optic and LA Thieves being middle of the table I think is pretty crazy, but you'll see where they rank on my power rankings. Coming in at number 11, I do have the Seattle Surge. Now, this is a team I'm high on going into this year. Like, if you saw my prediction video, I think Pered can win MVP. But this Seattle Surge team is really struggling going into this year. Right now, I have all the stuff pulled up on my second monitor. They're 1-3 with a 41.2% map count win rate. I mean, they lost to the LA Gorillas 3-2. They lost to Boston Breach 3-1. They beat London Royal Ravens, which is interesting, and then they lost to the Ultra 3-1. So overall, this Seattle team I think has a lot that they have still to prove, but right now I have them at 11 in my ranking. Then coming in at number 10, I do have the New York Subliners, who, if you didn't see, looked like the worst team by far after week 1, but in week 2 they got their reverse sweep. They ended up winning both of their second 2 series, so now being at 2-2, I think this team definitely is looking up. But for me, they looked like the worst team without a doubt in week number 1, and obviously I can't forget that just based on how they looked in week 2. So for that reason, I just have them down at number 10. If this was after week 1, they would have been last. I would have even had Vegas ahead of them. But right now, I think the Subliners are still looking like a bottom of the table team, but I do think they can definitely make waves at Major 1. Coming in at number 9, a surprising team, honestly. Did not know what to expect from this team because I didn't know much about, Brack and Vickle or Vickle. The announcers all call him Vickle, so maybe that's how you're supposed to say it, but I always thought it was Vickle. But either way, I didn't really know what to expect out of those two, and they've really been showing out, and I think this Florida team looks pretty solid, especially because the expectations were pretty low for them coming into the season. So Florida are 2-2, which puts them at 10th on the overall standings for the CDL, but they only have a 43.8% map win rate. So definitely, worse when it comes to their overall map wins, but at 2-2 overall record, you definitely can't question that. Overall, I mean, they beat Vegas, which, Vegas I have as my worst team, so not a crazy win. They got 3-0 by Optic Texas, which is unfortunate, and then they got 3-1 by the Minnesota Rocker, but then they 3-1 the LA Thieves, who, reigning champions, one of the best teams in the league. So, this team is all over the place, getting 3-0 and 3-1s by 2 of the best teams, but then 3-1ing one of the best teams as well. Pretty crazy overall from Florida Mutineers. Obviously, inconsistencies, you're going to see that when you have Havoc and Major Maniac, who have been inconsistent players in recent years, as well as you have 2 young guns coming into the. I think Brack was technically like in the league a few years back, but hasn't really been in pro play, so I've been talking about him as a young gun. But those 2 really obviously are still going to have their inconsistencies, being as they're new to the league. Then coming in at number 8, I do have the LA Gorillas. I think overall this team, they're very hit or miss. They look really good, then they don't really look good at all. Like they kind of just, I don't know, they're all over the place. I think they're similar to Florida, but I had higher expectations for the Gorillas, hence why, they're pretty lower on my rankings. I believe as of right now, they are 2-2. Let me actually pull it up just to double check. But yeah, they are 2-2, 47.1% map win rate. So a little bit ahead of Florida and New York in terms of that aspect of the game. But overall, a disappointing start, I think, for the Grills for me. Then coming in at number 7, the team that the coaches actually voted as the worst team in the league heading into week number 1 is the London Royal Ravens. I mean, they're a team that people, literally the coaches voted on this and they had them at 12. So this is the team that highly exceeded expectations in week 1, going 2-0, but then went 0-2 in week 2. So they finished, middle of the table 2-2. I think this is a team that has very streaky players. You look at guys like Asim last year, very, very streaky. Same thing with Paul X. Same thing with Zero, although I thought Zero was pretty consistent and pretty solid last year. But I think this is a team, Nasty, also another inconsistent player. But I think this is a team that should be very proud to be middle of the table right now based on the expectations they had coming into the season. Then at number 6, another team which week one, I thought they were, might end up being a top 3 team. But after week 2, I'm not really sure how I feel. Is the Boston breach at number 6? As I said, Boston started out strong, 3-1ing Atlanta FaZe in the opening series of the season, and then 3-1ing Seattle Surge, which is another team that people thought were going to be, super, super good this year. Obviously, it hasn't been going exactly to plan for them. But then they got 3-2 reverse swept by the NYSL, who looked like the worst team after week 1. And then they got 3-1 by LAG. So Boston, not really sure what exactly to expect out of them. They're, like I just said, they're all over the place, but it'll be very interesting to see kind of how they do, because the teams they lost to, I think they're better than, and the teams they beat, I kind of think they're worse than. So it's a weird, last year they beat the teams they were better than and lost to the teams they were worse than. This year so far, it's been the opposite, right? So very interested to see how they end up doing at Major 1. I think this is a team that could find themselves in the top 3, but could also get first round. Next up at number 5, this is the team that maybe people thought should be lower. This is a team maybe people think should be higher. I guess it kind of depends on I'm sure most people think they should be higher once you see the team, but I do have Optic at number 5. Optic, and I will get into this in a second, very hard team to judge based on what happened with their whole forfeiting the match situation. Obviously, they had a good chance of winning the series if they were heading into that 4th map with a 2-1 lead, but unfortunately the whole forfeit situation happened. So they, it's a weird situation, because in my mind they should kind of be 3-1 and Rocker should be 2-2, but unfortunately it's the other way around. So for me, I think, I have to do this based on official standings, as well as how, I tested watching how they play. So, right now, Optic's sitting at 2-2, middle of the pack, like I have in my news section right down there. So definitely, kind of odd, but maybe they should technically be 3-1. Who really knows? But I have them at number 5, and I think top 5 after the first 2 weeks is pretty good ranking. And at number 4, the team that just beat Optic Texas is LA Thieves, the reigning champions, a team that I had at number 1 going into the season. So definitely interesting to kind of see how this ended up shaking out. I mean, they obviously lost to Atlanta FaZe, which is a team that they beat multiple times right at the end of the year last year. So definitely some things they need to work out. But same thing happened with them last year, where they started out, decent, kind of slow, and then they put it together towards the end of the year. Hopefully it doesn't take them that long to put it together, especially being the reigning champions. But similarly to Optic, this is a team that's kind of weird to have them sort of not in the top 3, but being top 5 is awesome. Now, my top 3, even the top 5, overall, like I said, this was the hardest ranking I ever had to do. Honestly, if it were up to me, I would put these more in tiers rather than ranking, but I like to do number ranking. I think it's way more interesting and really forces you to think a little bit. So the top 3, I think you could really interchange these however you want. More the top 2, I think you can interchange. At number 3, I have Atlanta FaZe. They look good, really. They look really good sometimes. They look really bad other times. Not really sure how to feel about them. Same thing with Thieves, same thing with Optic. You expected a hotter start out of a team like Atlanta FaZe, but I mean, they're still sitting at a top 3 team on my power rankings. But it's really the top 2 that I think it was super hard to pick, because like I said with Rocker, they technically could be 2-2, right? It depends how you look at it. Depends if the forfeit situation didn't happen. Maybe they are 2-2 and we're talking about them at number 5 and Optic at number 1 or 2. You never really know. But for me, my 2 are Rocker and Toronto Ultra at number 1, which I did not think I was going to be saying. And let me just give you a rundown on why I have Ultra number 1. Honestly, only reason I have Ultra number 1 is not only are they, tied for first in the standings with Minnesota Rocker, if Rocker didn't get the forfeit win, Ultra might be the only 3-1 team possibly, right? They could be the only team solely in possession of the top spot in the standings, as well as I think Ultra looks like just the way they played, watching them play. I didn't watch a ton of week 1, but watching week 2, Ultra looked like an amazing team. They looked like they really had it going. It looked like their teamwork was on point. Standy and Kleenex were firing on all cylinders with that sub duo. Scrap looked absolutely amazing as, a rookie AR. Insight looking good. I think overall this Toronto Ultra team looks really, really good. Better than I expected them to be. I thought they'd be middle of the pack team with my original power rankings before the season. But, I think right now, based on how they looked in game, as well as other teams kind of just being all over the place, I had to put Ultra 1. If it was up to me, there'd be like the 5 teams, the top 5 there would be in like a category up top, and then there'd be like a pretty much a second category with the rest of the teams, because I think it's all super close right now. But either way, let me know what you think about these rankings. Where do you have 1, 2, 3, right? Where do you have Optic? It's hard to judge Optic and Rocker, like I said, but right now, this is what we have to work with. This is my basically first official power rankings, because now we've seen the teams in action in official matches. So I'm very excited to see what happens at the major. Stay tuned for my major 1 predictions, which I'll be doing, as well as stay tuned for my power rankings after major 1, which I'll definitely be doing and updating this list. Drop a like if you enjoyed, sub for more CDL content, and hopefully I'll see you all in the next video.